I was conducting pregnant and having a ball, and people were like, I would conduct orchestras, and they would say to my face, "Oh, we should have been informed that you were pregnant. We didn't know that you were pregnant. Why didn't you tell us?" And I'm like, why should it matter that I'm pregnant? Have you suddenly decided that a pregnant woman shouldn't conduct an orchestra? Because I can be on my feet all day long and be fine, like I'm tough. Like women conductors are tough.
Hey there, welcome to the Conductors Podcast. I'm your host, Chaowen Ting, a conductor with over 20 years of experience working with professional symphony orchestras, opera houses, new music groups, and vocalists. I'm also founder of Girls Who Conduct and have mentored hundreds of conductors from across the globe. I created the Conductors Podcast to share all the behind-the-scenes secrets with you while I interview conductors, musicians, and business gurus from around the world. This is a space created for conductors, conducting students, musicians, and non-musicians who are curious and interested in learning more about the profession, craft, industry, and business. Shy away from the real talk? No way. Money, hardship, growth, and the roller coaster of a conducting career are all topics we discuss here. I will give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you take action on your big dream, move through the fear that's holding you back, and have a real impact. Now, pull up a seat, make sure you're cozy, and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. Hello, hi there. Welcome to another episode of the Conductors Podcast. I'm your host, Chaowen Ting. I'm so glad for you to be joining me today because my guest today is a really awesome badass. She specializes in conducting a very unique type of performances, which is sometimes very often called orchestra pops. And before I introduce her, I wanted to give you a little background in case you're not super familiar with what is going on. So, the two typical types of this orchestra pops performances are one that there is a set band that tours. And when this band tours, they pick up an orchestra to work with at every single city that they are touring to. Say that they are now touring to Atlanta. Their agent will contact orchestras there in Atlanta to see who might be interested in partnering with them. And they might be moving on to Orlando next day or to, back to Baltimore in 2 days. And their agent would organize all these ensembles to work with this band. And the band usually have a set numbers of music. Depending on the orchestra and the venue, they might be playing say 9 out of the 12 in a pool or all 12 in a pool. Depending on the band and the agent, sometimes they contract directly with the orchestra. Say they might partner with Augusta Symphony, for example. That's one of the examples that I just assisted this past month when they had the pop series. Or it could be a contract with the venue. Say that they want to be having a show at the Fox Theater, and they would have a pickup orchestra. That's what we call. So it's not a regularly performed together group, but because of this gig, there's a contractor who went out and find all the musicians needed for this particular gig. So this is called a pickup orchestra. So this is one type of the orchestra pops, and Susie will talk about how she tours with a band around the world. The other type of symphony pops or orchestra pops are usually hosted by an established ensemble, say OFL, or the Philadelphia Orchestra, the Atlanta Symphony, or any established ensemble. During their pop series, and they might have a particular show that they bring in a different conductor for that. The conductor is very often a package with the particular show that you want to be doing. For example, and company might hold the rights to all the arrangement from Frozen. So when you want to have a Frozen in concert, either with the image or not, the company will sell you the music and all the videos and all that with a conductor. So you have to take their conductor if you want to perform this show with your orchestra. My guest today, Susie Bechasil Seiter, is a conductor for this very specific types of performances. She is a prolific conductor, orchestrator, and composer for film, television, video games, and live concerts. She currently stays busy conducting live-to-picture shows with symphonies, orchestrating various projects, and her first co-written Netflix limited series is due out this fall. She has also conducted the series like the Pokémon Symphonic Evolution or the Frozen show, like an example that I just mentioned, or Toy Story Live, and etc. In today's conversation, we talked a lot about working with professional orchestras, touring with family. She has 2 young kids just like me, and some of the barriers and obstacles that we encountered in our career. So we have a lot to cover, and let's dive in.
Welcome so much to the show, Suji. I'm so thrilled to speak with you. I so look forward to it. And thank you for coming to the Conductors Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So before we get started, though, I asked everybody this question. Can you give us a brief intro of your background and how you get to where you are right now?
Sure. So I studied music at a small liberal arts college, Franklin Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It was just a general music degree, but I got exposure to conducting ensembles because they offered conducting. So I took 3 years of conducting and conducted the wind ensemble and the orchestra and the choir while I was there. At this small liberal arts college, which was wonderful. And I also had a really small department. I think there were only maybe 6 people in my class. So after college, I went to grad school at SUNY Purchase, which was a studio composition degree. And that was great because it exposed me to commercial music, TV music, documentary music. I did internships and things like that with National Geographic. And then I taught for a really long time. I taught for 6 years. And I taught music, and I taught just actually regular kindergarten reading and first grade, which is coming in handy now that I'm a mom to a kindergartner. And while I was teaching, and this is kind of the story that changed my life. So I was teaching at an upstate New York boarding school called Millbrook School. And Alan Menken, both his daughters went there. So I always had an interest in film music, and I ended up meeting Alan Menken when he was dropping his daughter off at school. So I met him in the school cafeteria, and he's just this jolly, friendly dude. And I just went up to him and I said, hi, I'm a big fan of you. I mean, he's won 8 Academy Awards. And this guy really influenced my love of music. I grew up on The Little Mermaid and Aladdin. And I just said, I'm really interested in film music. And would I be able to give you a call? So he gave me his number. He said, sure, call me. And we kept in touch for a really long time. And he sort of became a mentor of mine because He's a straight shooter. He's very honest. He gave me a lot of really great advice. He listened to my music and gave me feedback. It was constructive, but, my music wasn't good when I was, 22. And he told me what I needed to do. And then he invited me to a recording session. He said he was recording some music for a film called Home on the Range. It was a musical, and he invited me to come to a day. And I said, actually, because I'd be traveling from New York to LA, can I stay? He goes, yeah, just stay for the whole week. I went to the studio. It was Todd AO Studios, which is now doesn't exist in LA anymore, but it was on the CBS lot. And I was a fly on the wall for a week of recording the score for Home on the Range. And that is when I just became addicted, and I needed to be part of this world. I was like, I have to be in this world. I don't know how, but I have to be.
This is a great story, and I have so many questions too
Yeah.
that I want to ask.
Well, you can ask. I mean, I had more time to edit it down. It's fine.
So coming back to your experience, and it looked like, please correct me if I were wrong, that you went to USC for film scoring. It was more on the composition and arranging side, perhaps?
Yes.
And then how did you get to conducting, even though you had some experience conducting for your undergrad? And did that prompt you into that you want to conduct, or you felt capable? Because I heard that from a lot of women, that they never thought they could conduct because they just didn't have the confidence, or it never occurred to them that's something that it can do.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, also when I was teaching music, I was conducting every day. So at Millbrook, when I was teaching at the boarding school, I had a jazz ensemble, and I had 3 choirs. So I was conducting. Yeah.
What's your instrument?
I'm a singer, and I'm a terrible pianist and a terrible violinist and a terrible bassoonist, and an okay singer. And so as, a conductor, music director at a school, I was conducting 4 ensembles a day, running rehearsals, things like that. And so when I got to USC, you had to conduct the cue that you wrote. And I'll never forget this because, all the people kind of that came before me, they were late or flaky, and so I ended up, I was 3rd on the docket and I had to go first. Just went up there and just did it, and it felt very natural because I had been teaching for 6 years and conducting ensembles 4 times a day. And I remember that teacher, looked at me and said, "You've clearly done this before." And I said, "Yes, I have." I definitely had the confidence because I didn't think about it. It's not scary to me. In fact, when I was, it was like my 2nd day in LA, I got to visit a recording session for Alias. Giacchino had invited the class, and most of the class didn't come because they were busy working on student films. So I was the only one that showed up from my class of 20. Wow. And the conductor asked, does anybody want to conduct a cue? And I just raised my hand without even thinking about it. And then I realized, I'm the only one that volunteered. There was another class there from UCLA where there were like 10 other students. But I just kind of raised my hand, and then I was like, oh, okay. So there is a bit of fearlessness in me. And I just did it, and I crashed and burned. I was terrible. But I did it, I have to say that's part of it, is just deciding to do it. And yeah, I totally crashed and burned, and I learned from it. I will say too, I met my spouse there too on that 2nd day. Chad was assisting Michael. It was like his, 3rd or 4th day on the job, and he was this friendly assistant that greeted me and made me feel, welcome, and he was very warm. So, it's it's part of it, most of the battle is just showing up and just, being a little bit unafraid to just make a fool out of yourself and just say, fuck it, what can I lose?
So it was never a decision that you have to make between conducting or composing. You were just all in the film scoring
Yeah.
industry. You
Yeah.
do whatever that takes.
Well, and also, too, because I was working for composers that needed an orchestrator, that when it came time to record the sessions, it made sense for me to conduct it because I had orchestrated all the music. So there was nobody else besides the composer that knew the music so well. So it made sense. So I would be conducting their music and they would be in the booth. Composers can be really great conductors, but composers also have so much other things to deal with in the booth, where they have prelays, they have electronics, they have to monitor the mix, they have to sit with the the showrunners or the producers and directors in the booth and listen to the music and discuss it. So usually the next best person to conduct is the orchestrator, if they have that skill. So I was just regularly conducting music that I was orchestrating.
That's awesome. And you said that you work really hard. I think a lot of people forget about that. That when people say, I thought I was just lucky being at the right place at the right time, but people don't remember that you have to be so prepared so you can shine when the opportunity is given to you. But I also heard that as women, you have to work 20 times harder or 50 times harder than your male colleagues to
Absolutely.
succeed. You felt the same, especially
Absolutely.
as a parent or just being as a woman, or like me as a woman of color. I felt I have to be extrally prepared and awesome so people won't pick on me on the same little question that my other colleagues made, that they will just say, hey, it's okay, they're young. And when it's me, it's, oh, women can do it.
Well, here's the thing. They're always going to pick on you, and that sucks. I know that. They're always going to pick on you. There are things that I can say on the podium because I am very direct. And we have sometimes one rehearsal and then and then the show is that night. So I don't really have time to be this like shrinking sweet violet person that I just need to say, hey, check those notes there because they're wrong. Well, first of all, you have to trust the musicians first and foremost, that if you hear mistakes and that you trust that they know that they're mistakes and that they will correct it because they have been doing this their entire lives. But then, if those mistakes don't get corrected, you do have to just fix it. And you have to fix it in the most efficient way possible. And that is just to be direct and polite. But that does not always go over well when you're a woman. We all know, the politics of this country, and that there are certain regions of the country that are extremely conservative. And I have conducted, those orchestras, and it is not a coincidence that they don't invite me back and they don't like me. I conducted a really prestigious orchestra in 2019, and it was a very difficult show. And with very little rehearsal. We had probably half as much rehearsal as we needed to. And I remember, so the administration is very nice where they welcome you, but it's the orchestra that determines whether you get invited back. And their main comment to me was that when mistakes happened, that my face didn't change.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. I'm like, if a man, and first of all, like when mistakes happened, my face doesn't change. I just fix it. I immediately pay attention to it, fix it. But my face does not change. And if a man were to do that, they'd be like, oh, he's steadfast. He's unbreakable. But if a woman does that and she's young, it's like, oh, she doesn't seem to have a clue.
I got that a lot. Or when our faces change, they say they look concerned and they are not fixing it, or they are
Yeah.
not addressing it. They're too emotional. They can handle it.
Yeah, it's such a double standard, and it's a hard world out there, and it's not a coincidence that there when I travel to a red state, I am not well received. I am dark skinned. I am a female, and I look young. I'm not well received on the East Coast or the West Coast. They love me. They're like, oh, this is great. It was efficient. I just ran the show, and I got the work done. And so, now that I'm in a spot, I'm like, okay, I kind of want to work with people that want to work with me, as opposed to going in and being thrown to the wolves and having to face this double standard that I can't be direct and get the work done, just like a man can. I will say, too, that the additional challenge of being a mom, and being a mom to young children, especially, is that people also feel that they need to decide your priorities. And that needs to stop. I was conducting pregnant and having a ball, and people were like, I would conduct orchestras, and they would say to my face, oh, we should have been informed that you were pregnant.
Wow.
Like, we didn't know that you were pregnant. Why didn't you tell us? And things like that. And I'm like, why should it matter that I'm pregnant? Have you suddenly decided that a pregnant woman shouldn't conduct an orchestra? Because I can be on my feet all day long and be fine, like I'm tough. Like, women conductors are tough.
Yes, they are.
It's frustrating to me. They get frustrated at, or they tell you, that you shouldn't be traveling and things like that. I'm like, hey, I love traveling. I get to go and enjoy wine, and after rehearsal, and talk to adults and see a new city. It's a vacation to me. And they don't really think of it that way, because suddenly you're a mom and your priorities are supposed to change. And it's like, of course, like I am very present for my children, but I'm also a much better mom because I'm doing what I love.
Yeah.
I'm working with orchestras. I love orchestras. As much as I am frustrated at discrimination and things like that, I love orchestras. I love the people in orchestras. I find them, even the ornery ones, I find them fascinating, because they all have amazing stories behind them of how they became that, best, person to make that chair.
Yeah, usually like there has, don't you miss your kids?
I know.
When do you get to talk to them? I was like, it's not your business. I'm here to work and I
Oh,
enjoy.
I'll just say no.
Yeah.
They're like, do you miss your
Really?
kids? And I say no. Like, I'm not gone that long. Like, I'm fine with them, for 2 or 3 days. Like, I'm having a great.
I love that. Those are really my vacations. So it's like really like not having to to prep lunch, wake them up and do other things.
Oh, you do
But
have to prep lunch. You just have to prep like an entire week's worth of lunch the week before you leave, because you still have to do all those things.
I used to, but then I realized my husband has his easy way of doing lunch. Like me prepping, make him having to do extra work to heat them up. So like dads always have their own ways of doing it. You just have to trust your partner.
Totally.
But
And
anyway,
I
to come back, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I don't know if, like, I wanted to get into this a little bit about partnerships too. So, because my husband is a composer, and we talked about, possibly talking about how to balance a family with a career and everything. And here's the thing too. It's like, Chad and I are partners. We met, working in this industry, and we both love it. And neither one of us wanted to give that up to have children, and we didn't. We both are very driven. I'm sort of ridiculously driven. I have conducted recording sessions after both my kids within 2 weeks, so like I think 10 days with my first kid and I had a C-section, I was up on the podium. And then 9 days after that, I was up on the podium after my second kid.
You're strong. You're tough. I couldn't. I had some complications from my C-sections, so I was in bed for a good 3 weeks after both of my kids were born.
I also my mom friends say I'm a little crazy, and I'm like, you know what? I am a little crazy. Like, and that's the thing too, is that we live in this freelance world where we don't know what our next paycheck is going to be. So, I really wanted to keep working. I love working, and also like both my husband and I both need to work. For our mental, health, but also for finances and to keep this, this life that we have. But like, so I don't know if, some people know, I conducted this tour. It was an Evanescence tour where I got this offer actually while I was conducting 10 days after my first kid. I got the offer to conduct the Evanescence tour. And they said it was going to be just a few cities, and we were going to pick up an orchestra in every city, and you would learn the show. And, Amy Lee, the lead singer, loves orchestras. And so she actually wanted to make the orchestra like a celebrated part of the show and not, just people behind a curtain in the background, which is what I initially assumed. But she's like, no, I want to be surrounded by the orchestra and have them around me, but then also have you right next to me. And I was like, what? Like I was literally in line sight with her, right next to her when she was on the piano, front and center. And I got that tour offer and I turned it down. And my husband said, wait, what? Like, and I said, well, I've just given birth, and it's too bad because that tour sounds like a dream for a conductor.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, hold on. He's like, it's only for a couple shows. He's like, you told me you were going to be a working mom. Why don't you be a working mom? Like, this is a huge opportunity. And he's like, I used to listen to Evanescence in college all the time. And this is a great opportunity. And he turned me around. And so I took that job, that the few cities turned into like 80 cities over a year. And I would come home, the band has families too. So we would be out for like, 2 weeks, and then we'd go back for 2 weeks. And then the nice thing was, even though I'd be gone for 2 weeks and I had a baby at home, I would come home for 2 weeks and solely focus on my baby, and stalk my baby on the Nest camera as well when he slept. So it was like, balancing that career and family. I mean, it's hard. It takes a lot of work, but it's so worth it too.
So just for the listeners who are less familiar with the orchestra scene or for this kind of touring shows, can you tell us a little bit about how they operate, both as guest conductors, say like you work with a orchestra, say you're invited by Orchestra A or Orchestra B that you fly in for a show, and then kind of also touring, how are they different, and how is your typical work like?
Okay. Well, the thing that I love about this life is there's no typical day or no typical work. I love that every day is different and it's an adventure. So for touring, and I've done a lot of tours. I've done the Legend of Zelda tour, I've done Pokemon tour, and I've done the Evanescence tour and the Lindsey Stirling tour. So, and they all lasted like 2 or 3 years each. So I've been touring a lot. So the way that the tours work is I'm either in a hotel or on a tour bus, and the tour bus is fun. Living on a tour bus with a rock band is like the funnest thing ever, because I was treated like a member of the family. You go into a new city, and it could be St. Louis, it could be Moscow. And there's a contractor that contracts the local orchestra. And so I wake up from the tour bus, I go into the venue, and rehearsal starts at like 1. So actually, because I was a new mom, I was pumping milk all the time. And would pump milk before rehearsal, then go and run rehearsal. It would be from like 1 until 3:30, with a 20-minute break in between. And then I would break for a couple hours, and then the show is at 8 or 7. For Evanescence, we did an opening number of just orchestra, where it was just featured, and we did, music inspired, by Evanescence or things like that, because they had some music that was Mozart based. They have a song called Lacrimosa. So I did an arrangement of a chamber ensemble for Lacrimosa, and we did the Mozart Lacrimosa. And then I would get on the bus, and we would go to sleep and drive to the next city. It was the most comfortable sleep ever, sleeping on a tour bus. And then I would wake up and just rinse and repeat. And we did that, about 5 shows a week. And that was touring. It was so much fun. I made incredibly great friends, and I became like a family member to a band that had been together for a long time, but they welcomed me immediately. And like a band member. And when my child would come on tour, my husband would join, and my child would come, and they would be holding the baby and playing with the baby. It was just this family. I remember in Moscow, I had probably the worst rehearsal of my life. You want to talk about sort of gender bias and things like that. It was so difficult. It was like a battlefield constantly. And the orchestra was quite beautiful. But when they made mistakes, they were really bold mistakes. And I came out of that rehearsal looking like I got hit by a train. Just a constant battle of hostility, and I remember walking off that stage, and the band saw me. The band and crew saw me, and they knew that it was a tough rehearsal. And we had done that show 40 times before, and I got a knock in my dressing room, and they all came in with like bottles of wine and snacks, and they just sat around me, and we just kind of drank a little wine and just settled in. And they just helped me recover. So that was sort of this really a career highlight for me, and a beautiful, beautiful tour that I did. I've been on tour with my husband before, and that's a lot of fun, but also crazy because, we're working together. We're communicating and, handing off the kids and things like that. Now the guest conducting part, that works differently, where I'm invited by artistic directors of orchestras. And it's usually of a show that I know or I'm well prepared to do. So something that I'm used to doing are, in addition to the rock shows, I'm used to doing the live film to picture shows. And so I would get invited by the artistic director, usually through an agent. Like I have a wonderful agent, Emily Yoon, with ICM, and she's like a power mom too. And she's a rock star. And so I kind of love that we get each other very well. She also, doesn't ever try to, she gets the discrimination and everything. And so she knows, and she's tough too. So she's my agent. And so she'll get a call and she just knows that this is kind of the show that I like to do. Is, I've done Toy Story, I've done Frozen several times. And so she has relationships with artistic directors. So she's able to put me forward for those things. And so I travel, and it's usually 2 rehearsals, and then the show. And those work more like a vacation, because 2 rehearsals and 1 show is really nice, as opposed to like 1 rehearsal and then show that night and then leave, like a tour, where, the artistic directors or the administration takes me out to dinner the night before rehearsal. And, they're always lovely. And usually the orchestras are lovely too. And, we do the show and then I leave the next day and then they review me. And then, it depends on whether they liked me or not. And like I said before, like, because I'm pretty direct, and I'm a woman and I'm a woman of color, like a lot of people on the East Coast or in West Coast, those orchestras really love me.
Yeah.
And then,
it's a different mentality for sure.
Yeah. And then when I go to, much more conservative cities, they don't like me as much. And that's okay. That's kind of also the lovely thing about being in my mid-40s and, having a great career already, is that I'm okay with not being everybody's cup of tea. I know how I am, and I'm not going to soften myself or behave in a way that they see fit that I behave. And talk in a way that I talk. I really am just who I am, and I'm really good at, 10 things. So if I'm not, fit for that kind of show or kind of group, that's okay. Because I will always continue to work, and it's so much more rewarding when you're working with an orchestra that, welcomes you, isn't really bitter about being there in the first place.
So it sounds like that you are constantly working with new orchestras, especially when you're on tour, that you're picking up a local orchestra or a local ensemble. How do you adjust working with different groups of musicians, or because you have so little rehearsal time, you don't worry about that, just going and try to fix as much as that you can?
Well, this was actually my method pre-COVID. Would go around and meet the players beforehand, because meeting the players on a level that's equal, where we're just making it about the music and the show, and not about anything else, is really telling. It tells me a lot about the orchestra. It tells me a lot about the strengths and weaknesses of each player. Because a lot of those pickup orchestras, they call them pickup orchestras, for touring, is that these orchestra members, they rarely all play together. They're all kind of made up of different.
Yeah, they're freelancers. They pick up gigs.
Exactly. So there was this one time, for example, I was on tour with Pokemon, and I met people, and some people, if they have questions, I'm like, okay, note in my mind, they're prepared. They've looked at the music before. I know that. And then, I met a timpanist who goes, "Oh my gosh, there was so much traffic and this and that, and I barely made it, and I'm so sorry, but I'll have to, hopefully I will try to get all the notes." And I take a mental note. Okay. She's looked at it. She's overwhelmed. What can I do? And here's something that has made me a better conductor because I became a mother, is because I am so empathetic to that. Okay, you've had a bad day. You've had traffic. Maybe you don't have everything together today, and that's okay. I'm going to help. I'm here to help. And so how can I help you? And so I answer those questions. I try to calm things down. I try to create a friendly environment where they don't have to be afraid to make mistakes, because rehearsals are supposed to, that's the time to make mistakes. And I also kind of realize that she's going to probably be overwhelmed. And so I may need to pay more attention to her than anyone else. And it's fine. Everybody's human. And I love people in orchestras. And so that helps me prepare, because there's all sorts of different personalities, and it helps me prepare beforehand, because I know the music. I mean, I'm always prepared with the music. So how can I guide the different personalities with however, horrible day they're having, or, what they're bringing to that rehearsal, and then try to aim it towards the music and making a good show.
I love what you said about that you are feeling. Let me rephrase that. I love that you say you felt you're a better conductor now after you became a parent, because I heard that from my teacher as well. He felt he had to relieve learning things and understand everybody has different strengths and all that, and which helped him. But I wanted to ask you another thing, because I think in the beginning of my career, I was advised to never tell people that I was a parent, or not to put my kids' pictures on social media. And I was told by an admin, say, "Hey, a white man holding a baby, that's cute. With a woman conductor, and people were hesitant to hire you in the first place already. And seeing you have family, that gives them too much other thoughts, and it wasn't going to be great for my career." How do you feel about that? Or do you feel that you had babies later in your career, that you're already established, that you didn't have to worry so much about that?
I had my first child when I was 40. So I did a lot of work before that. But yes, I do believe that, and again, we can do a whole podcast on bias in orchestras. Because first of all, everybody has bias, and systematic bias definitely exists, and it is alive and well in orchestras. My attitude is you can do whatever you feel comfortable. But what I really hate about it is not being in control. Hey, my kids are cute. So if I want to post something, then I'm going to post something. And I found that the people that I have the most rewarding relationships with allow me to be authentic, and I allow them to be authentic. And no one is happy when they have to not be authentic, because that's like a prison. And why would you want to work and live in this prison where you have to hide aspects of your life that are important and that make you better? Just because you have a child does not make you a worse off or distracted or whatever conductor, much like a man with a child. Oh, well, he's a great provider, and he's a great conductor, and he's a great provider, and he needs to provide for his family. But a woman, no, she needs to be at home with her child. That needs to stop. it may not be my job to stop it, but I am certainly not going to imprison myself on that belief, that you need to decide, you need to hide, beautiful things that are important to you. Because that's a thing, is that music is about beauty and passion and feelings. That's why we all got into this. It's not about ego. Like, screw the ego. It's not. It's about music and beauty. And it's the ego and all of these biases that get in the way. And the thing is that with classical music, there's so much systematic bias that, if a, conservative orchestra is suddenly not, receiving me well, like, I'm not surprised by that. And that's okay. I don't need or want to work with you. Because I want to go in and be authentic, and I want to welcome them to be authentic, and I want to make beautiful music together. And I don't, having to fear who I am or not be who I am is not how I choose to find happiness. If I work a little less, then that's fine. But, you just end up, when you're older, finding your people and loving who you are and finding people that love you for who you are. I would hate to work for an orchestra where I had to hide that, because relationships and closeness and authenticity is really the core of a conductor and orchestra relationship.
So I know that now you say, like, after working for quite a while, you have a feeling of how an orchestra might receive you, and it's okay for you to pick your works now. But what if you walk into a rehearsal and things that you didn't expect, or somehow you felt that the vibe was not okay? Do you have any stories that you want to share and how you deal with that?
Oh, sure.
We have a lot. Both.
Oh yeah. Man, I got invited to sort of replace another female conductor who had to have surgery. And this was years ago. It was this like New Year's show, Pops, very prestigious, beautiful orchestra. And it was a show, first of all, it was music that I wasn't really comfortable conducting, and this was very new to me, but I was in this position where I felt like I needed to get in front of every orchestra to advance my career. And so I went there, and, the administration, most administrations are lovely, and they were also lovely. But the second I stepped out of that dressing room, like, I didn't even get on the podium. It was like the musicians were so hostile. And it's like, okay, it's New Year's Eve. They hate that they're at work today. And they're taking it out on me. And that sucks. And it was just kind of a hostile rehearsal from start to finish. The trombone player, okay, first of all, the administrator said, we don't have enough money, to have all these doubles, and the trombone player immediately was like, oh, well, this should be played on, this double, and this should be played on this double. And he like got me right out of the gate, and I was like, no. and I'm like, well, that sucks that he wasn't prepared for that, and there was no communication. I just kind of had to tell him no. And I literally just walked in there, having flown in that night before. And man, that was a hard rehearsal. I was working with a singer who was lovely, but he woke up with the worst cold, and that happens all the time. And we just had to deal with it. And I had to kind of become the mom and just make sure that he was well taken care of, that he could still perform tonight. So it's like, you know, and here's the mom part of the conductor is that you have to think of everyone and everyone's well-being, you know. And, you know, there was a trumpet player that fell backwards and injured himself. And so, you know, I had to stop and make sure he was okay. And it was just, you know, it was an incredibly negative experience. And, you know, I was with a different manager and he told me, he said, you know, well, the orchestra said that you were not of the caliber conductor that they are used to seeing. And that hurt my feelings. But then I realized, okay, like, this is a really great orchestra where they have famous conductors. So the orchestra is complaining that I am not of the caliber that they're used to seeing. I'm like, of course not. I'm like, conductors are not magically made immediately to become great. And here's where systematic bias comes in too. You know, if you're a white man, you are a million times more likely to be nurtured in this music world and to become a conductor and to have mentors and to have people that support you and to have orchestras that support you and want to make you better and want to work with you. If you're a woman, and if you're a woman of color, you know, it's like, fucking A, it is a million times harder for you. So of course I'm not going to be Stokowski. Okay? Like, and that kind of pisses me off that was like one of the reasons why, you know, they didn't receive me. It's like, well, of course, you know, like, of course I have not had the pedigree because I haven't had the opportunities. You know, yes, I was invited by the administration, but it's like, you can't expect me to be this 80-year-old white man, you know, who has had every opportunity in the world. No, like, I am a woman of color who has been discouraged by so many teachers. You know, I can't even tell you how many teachers told me that I needed to quit or I needed to stop or I will never become a conductor because I'm a woman. You know, like, that is rampant. No teacher should ever, ever, ever say that to any student. And when they say that to women, I feel like that's equal. That's even more evil because teachers are supposed to nurture. That's their job. Yeah, they can be tough, you know, but like, I've had countless teachers that just basically put me down and tell me, you know, that I'll never make it. I'll never make a cent. And, you know, it makes me angry that, that people wonder why there aren't women conductors. And it's also because orchestras are not willing to invest in diversity. You know, when you're not just a woman of color, even men of color, you know, you do not have the same opportunities that other people do. You know, you don't have the same music education opportunities. You don't have the support. You don't have the funding. There's so many things. It's so complicated. You know, we talk about systematic racism and systematic bias. It all plays into the orchestra. And that is a huge, you know, culmination in an orchestra saying that I was not of the caliber that they were used to seeing. And it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna be, you know. And that's funny that you expect me to be that way, you know, and you invite a woman, but you don't actually want diversity, you know, because diversity really takes commitment. You know, it takes commitment, it takes the will, it takes white men to become allies in this and not just sort of passively, well, let's include this person to check a box. Diversity is never going to happen that way on the podium. Like, people need to invest in diversity and commit to it. And unfortunately, I don't see a lot of that happening. And I'm out there in the world. I'm out there as guest conductors. And because these comments and these things come back to me, I think that orchestras are still not committed to diversity, not in a way that really needs to happen. And it needs to happen much earlier too. It needs to happen also, with teachers. But it also has to happen with orchestras. The first woman, in Atlanta, just got appointed last year, and I look at her and I'm like, man, she's great. And how many battles did she have to fight to get to where she was? And it takes my breath away. And I'm in admiration of her. I'm in admiration of Marin, who's doing a lot of work. But, it's women that are helping other women, and it's minorities that are helping other minorities. But, white people can be allies too, and they should be. I would love it if they could be. They really could commit to it because it is still very much, a white person's world in the orchestra, and we need allies, and we need people in power to be allies.
Yeah, because it's, as I say, and then it's also about perception. People perceive you in a very different way when you get on a podium and conduct. As you say, they are much more forgiving and nurturing and supporting to a certain type of young conductors that they perceive. They are the rising stars, the emerging new talents, and all that.
Yeah.
And I totally felt, I just came back from Paris and I was looking at that orchestra that we worked with. There were only 2.5 people of color in the orchestra. And out of 14 conductors, there were 2 of color. And it's like, yeah, it's a systematic thing.
Absolutely.
But just to wrap up our conversation today, I wanted to ask, what's kind of looking back, was there anything that if you can do it all over again, that you would do it differently? Or what's the biggest thing that you learned that you maybe you wish you had learned it earlier, or like things that became so important?
I would, well, first of all, I don't think I would have done anything differently. The only thing I would have done differently was I would have worried less. I was always worried about what people thought of me. And, when I would get criticized, I would really take it to heart. But now that I'm kind of like in this great position where I'm constantly turning down work because I just don't have the time and there's not 8 of me. I wouldn't have worried that much, because the thing is, I really committed to just being authentically who I am. I love being in my 40s and not caring, and just being who I am. And so I would have not worried as much, about that, but that's kind of part of being young and not having the confidence. And that's the beauty of getting older too, is that I think I've always had some sort of confidence in order to do this, but I did used to constantly worry about what I was thought of or how I was perceived, and I really don't care anymore.
I feel you, because this is my first year that I started turning down works and without feeling guilty or bad or worried that they might not invite me back. But now I'm at a better place in my career that I want to be good. I don't want to take a job just because I felt I need to take every single job.
Yeah, and with the type of shows I do now, like I don't do shows that are really far out of my expertise. Because I don't have anything to prove anymore. I don't need, if they ask me to conduct Beethoven, I'm like, no thanks. Like, it's not my thing. If you have a live to picture show, that's my thing. And people sort of, discount those shows as not difficult and things like that. I'm like, movie to picture shows are really, really hard.
They are really hard.
Yeah, but that's what I do, and I do it well because I work with the click, I work with the orchestra, and I figure it out, and I prioritize the picture above everything else. Because that's my upbringing. I work in film scoring, so this is really my expertise. So these are the shows that I do. I just did Frozen live with San Diego Symphony. And I loved them. They were all I love California orchestras. They're so like laid back, but they're good. And so, like you live in San Diego, you're probably pretty happy. And I did Frozen, and it is hard. I mean, that show is relentless. It's wall to wall music. And it's really difficult music. And, afterwards, I think everybody was very, very lovely to me. And even sort of the most venerable people in the orchestra that I could tell would come up to me and say, "You were brilliant." And I was like, you know what? I was on fire up there. Like I don't say that about myself all the time, but there are times where I was like, I was really on fire. And my 5-year-old son was in the audience too, watching me and seeing me, having practiced so much to see me up there, in front of 3,000 people. That was important. For him to understand and for him to connect with that. And he loves Frozen. So it was just, a really wonderful show. And so that's really what I excel at, is I excel at the movie to picture shows, the families and things like that. When I talk to the audience, I usually do bring up the fact that I am a mom, and sort of the opposite of what you've heard about, like, oh, you got to hide that, hey, I do these family to picture shows, and I tell them that I have kids, that are 4 and 2. And so I love to be able to relate to the audience that way, because they're all, running around trying to calm their kids and watch the show. And I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. Like mine's backstage right now. Yeah. And so, it's that kind of human connection that's really authentic that I love too. And so I love doing those shows. They're my thing for sure.
And just for the record, conducting those kind of score is not any way easier than conducting Brahms, Beethoven, or Tchaikovsky, because you have to be so on point. There are so many different transitions, and especially with click and film, you need to get things right away. And more difficult is like very often you don't even have enough rehearsal time. You have to put everything together very quickly, be very efficient, effective, and just get everything right. That's a great skill to have.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people discount those shows, but I really think that,
they're really hard.
They are really hard. And they also, outreach to other audiences too, which I also think is important.
Yeah. But thank you so much for all that you just shared. And I will put that in the show notes, but could you please tell my listeners where they can find you, your website or social media that they can follow you?
I have a website. It's susieseiter.com, Seiter. So it's Susie, Susie, Seiter. And then I'm on Instagram at Susie Bench, Susiebench.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Here you have it, my friends. And it was really, really an interesting and exciting conversation, wasn't it? I hope the information that we shared was useful to you or somehow encouraging and positive, even though we talked so much about stereotypes, bias, and the barriers that we have encountered. But we definitely want to be encouraging to everyone. This is a hard profession, but there are a lot of great people working there. And if you reach out to us, we can form a great supportive system for each one of us. And we want to see more and more and more great women, non-binary folks, and people of color on the podium leading all kinds of performances. If you're liking this show, please don't forget to leave a good review or subscribe. And this is the best way to send me some encouragement. And I will see you next week at the same time, same place. Bye for now.